see James Harden getting them. Now we'll go ahead and take you through the steps and the process of how he actually got them. On this channel, I do videos on how people get dreadlocks so that you guys can emulate that. So I've done videos on Lil Pump, Trippie Redd, Lil Wayne, Scar Lord, and many other people. And all we do is break it down in many steps on how you can actually do this. First step is always talking about the hair type. James Harden has a very tight curl pattern, and typically African Americans have a tight curl pattern. It's usually in the 4 range, and obviously it is possible for an African American to have a looser curl pattern down to the 3s, possibly even 2s, but it's kind of rare. Now when it comes to the 1 ranges like straight hair or even the 2 range, you typically see, Asians or Caucasians. And majority of these videos, believe it or not, are dealing with the 4 range hair type because it's most typical for dreadlocks and it's easier for dreadlocks to actually lock up with the 4 range hair type. So speaking of the 4 range hair type, James Harden has about a 4B hair type. With him being a 4B, there's many options he can choose from when it comes to the method in order to getting dreadlocks. But obviously it's very clear to see that he's actually doing 2-strand twists in order to get his dreadlocks. And a lot of you are probably saying, well, he probably doesn't even have dreadlocks, he probably just has 2-strand twists. And the thing is even now he's still in the beginning stages, so I wouldn't count him out of getting dreadlocks. I see him as a person that would actually get them. Now looking at these pictures up close, you can obviously see in most of these that they are in 2-strand twists. But I have been getting the requests so often on doing his hair. So this is an actual perfect way to actually get dreadlocks, especially with this hair type. All you really need is gel, water, and a rat tail comb. And all you do is you create your sections where you want your dreadlocks to be, and then you create those into 2-strand twists. And then eventually that will lock up. Or you can do a twist out, and then those 2 twists out of the 2-strand twists will eventually lock up over time. Because when it comes to dreadlocks, all you want to do is create the section and then keep that section in place that entire time so that it gets to its full maturity of being a dreadlock. That's essentially what it is. Nothing else. Just creating sections, holding those sections until they fully mature. Now in this case, James Harden can go either direction. He can either keep the 2 strands in and then eventually allow those to lock up, because many people have done that. It's the same thing as braid locks, where they'll braid the hair and then the braids eventually turn into dreadlocks. But they typically do start out as a rattlesnake dreadlock. And if you haven't seen my video on a rattlesnake dreadlock, it's essentially a dreadlock with a braid at the very tip of it. And what happens is if you do braid locks, your hair will be braided and it eventually grows out and the roots start to lock up. And then eventually, obviously, the tips will follow. But the reason I call it a rattlesnake dread is because it looks like a rattlesnake's rattle, because you have a dreadlock with a braid at the tip of it. But one thing I want you to notice about James Harden's dreadlocks is that the 2-strand twists closer to his hairline aren't holding up as well as the 2-strand twists in the back. And the reason being is because typically on men, and generally on every person's head, the hair that is closer to the hairline is a little bit more thin and not as tight of a curl pattern versus the hair on the back of the head. Because the fun fact is that the hair on the sides and the back of your head will stay there for your entire life. That hair is permanently there. That's why when they do hair transplants, they take hair from the back of your head and then install the hair wherever it's needed. Like when you see commercials of Bosley and things like that. But with the hair being a little bit thinner towards the hairline and the curl pattern not being as tight, you can see how the 2-strand twists are a little bit more loose. And that's really to be expected even when you're starting out dreadlocks. You always have to take note that the hair that's closest to the hairline, or just even the edge of your hairline anywhere across your head, it's going to be a little bit tougher for it to lock up. Now this is where we start to see James Harden going into the braids. They're almost micro braids, but at the same time they're not that skinny. So essentially these are box braids, but at first glance I thought these were actually dreadlocks, especially because you guys recommended to show his dreadlocks, quote unquote. But yeah, he does have braids in, as far as I know. All the photos I see on the internet and on his Instagram are actually of him in braids or 2-strand twists. Now one thing that I have noticed is that in some photos I do see the braids actually being very messy, and obviously that's from playing basketball and things like that. And obviously that's going to happen, especially when you're active like that. Your hair is going to want to unravel quite a bit just because you're sweating. There's more water and precipitation actually hitting the hair. But with him being okay with it actually getting a little messy sometimes leads me to believe that he will eventually allow these to lock up and turn into dreadlocks. Now braids are almost essentially the same as getting 2-strand twist dreadlocks. You can either allow the braids to lock up themselves and then do a braid out and allow those sections from the braid out to lock up. It's 2 different ways. You can choose which one you would like to do. Another quicker way is to actually do either 2-strand twists or braiding